Looks like we're both in there. And I'll get this one started. Okay, here we are. And welcome to episode 5. Episode 5 of the Past Presidents podcast of the New Jersey Land Title Association. As usual, I'm your host, Casey Wall. And today, we're going to change things up a bit. We have a special guest host. This is Heather Bell.
You all are asking yourself, Heather hasn't been president yet, so this doesn't make sense. But Casey is our interviewee today.
It's my turn, apparently. So I'm going to sit back, relax, and let Heather drive the boat for the rest of the show. So, Heather, it's your show to do with me what you will, but please be gentle.
No.
Okay.
I'm kidding. We won't grill him too hard. I'm just going to start by saying that I am honored to be able to give this interview because I'm sure most of the people that will listen and watch this will agree. You had one of the most impactful presidencies in a long time.
Thank you.
Now, we've been through a pandemic. The association was up in air for a little bit, but Casey came in like a lion and made some really important and substantive changes, which are showing how we can make our association better today. So,
thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I thought I would start with a little walk down memory lane back to the summer of 2023 when Jack was saying goodbye and Casey was taking the reins, and I wrote a little piece in The Advocate to talk a little bit about the changing of the guard. And I thought, what a great way to start off our interview by touching on how we felt in the beginning before you made all those impactful changes.
Okay.
So I wrote a little something about Casey, and it went a little something like this. If you have not had the opportunity to meet and have a conversation with Casey, and I know that we would be hard pressed to find you, you need to do so immediately. He led my way through most of my time with the agency section and showed me the dedication it takes to make a difference. I often find myself asking, what would he do when issues arise? And he came out for guidance in my current role, which at the time that I wrote this was agency section chair. He shows a real passion and true commitment for working with others in the association toward our common goal of bettering our industry. He is always chiming in with a good idea or thought on any topic being discussed and offering to help him make it a reality. We are truly a lucky group to have him at the helm for the next year. Let's focus on that for a minute. He hadn't even done anything yet, but I knew we were going to see some really great change coming through, just knowing him for as long as I have. Been a pleasure to work with you and a pleasure to take this journey through the management of the association with you.
Thank you.
I'm not really good at speaking in front of people, so at the convention this year, when I was saying my thank yous for agency section, I didn't say any. Yeah. And I think that you and Lisa Dombrowski deserve the most.
Oh, so. Thank you very much. So it's humbling and very satisfying and gratifying to hear that others appreciate the effort and intent that I put into all the roles that I've had here at the Land Title Association. I can honestly say it's been one of the best things I've ever done, and not just because we got results in my president year, but because I really believe like the people who step up and volunteer of their time for this endeavor are the best people in business. And it's always a goal of mine to seek out and find people who want to do the right thing, even if it's hard, and who are willing to make hard choices and to bring other people along. And that's usually my priority, is to make sure that I don't just come in and shake things up, but I make sure that the people behind me are prepared for when it's their turn to make their own changes. And that was something I really focused on as president.
Yes.
Making sure not only that we had an agenda and that we set about it with seriousness, but that, John and Lisa and John and now you are all well prepared for when it's your turn in the hot lights, and not to be afraid of it, but to embrace it and make it mean something.
Yes, I think that from my standpoint, one of the things you showed me right away was that sometimes making the hard choices is hard. It's hard to get through the hard choice, but once you have, everything starts falling into line for the better.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been on the management board before, obviously, but I can say that there was no period of adjustment when we took over. It was Casey was out, I came in, and everything just kind of continued. And I really think that had a lot to do with what you just said and what you put into place. So
yeah, I had felt that was always like the missing ingredient. The lack of salt was just that everybody that came in, for as long as I've been in this, has been, wonderful of giving of their time. But the one ingredient that I thought was missing was focusing on the connectivity between the future and the present. We've done a very good job of being in the present and, making our voices heard and getting things done. But it's just as important to be like, okay, when I'm gone, when somebody else is in charge, are they prepared? What should I be doing for them? What should I be doing for the president 5 years from now?
Yes.
To make sure that they can do the same thing or better than what we've done here today.
Yeah. And I think that your choices and changes helped us get into a position where we can start looking toward the future. There was a little bit of cleanup that needed to be done, but one thing we're working on now is having a strategic plan every year and being able to take that plan and thread it down into the committees so that we're all unified and working toward a common goal. And I'm telling you the truth, people, he had a huge, if not the majority part of that. So
I appreciate that. It's very nice of you to say. It's absolutely the truth that nobody could do it by themselves, and I couldn't have asked for a better team. And I think the current board is fantastic, and I'm excited to see at the end of the year when we tally up all the things you guys have gotten done. I'm excited to stand up and give you guys a round of applause. So,
well, that will mean a lot coming from you.
Thank you.
All right, so let's start with a couple questions. Because we're going to talk about, we've been saying a lot about how impactful it was. So let's get into some detail on that for the people that may not know exactly how much you had your hands in the cookie jars. Well, I'm going to just start by saying, how do you feel? Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm good.
You made it. You've done it. You've got the plaque. You've made the speech.
Right. I think, when you get to the end of it and you look back, I was relieved, knowing that I didn't have to worry about this anymore. But by the same token, you have a sense of like, I probably, do they still need me to be around? Like, should I hang out and wait a minute? But I do. Yeah, but you don't. You'd like me to be around. You don't need me. You guys are so totally self-sufficient. But the truth is that, for me, I'll always be there for anybody that asks for my help. That's part of my disease. I have a problem. I can't say no. Or it's very hard for me to say no when somebody's asking me for their help.
Which is why he's sitting here with me today instead of, in his office.
So, I think I feel good about what we did, and I'm happy that it's over. But there, immediately after it was over, there was a part of me that was like, all right, I already miss it. Like it's a missing piece. Like it was part of my routine and part of my daily thought process.
Yeah.
But now that I'm many months removed, I'm fine, and so I've got plenty of other stuff to do.
Yeah, it's not like he doesn't wear any more hats. I mean, Come on, what are we talking about? So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you accomplished while you were there. Let's get into some specifics. I think one of the biggest things that you led the charge on was our lawsuit against Hudson County. That took some bravery. The counties control a lot of what we do day to day as agents. So
yeah,
you never want to be the one on the wanted poster in the county office.
It's true. It's true. I will say that I'm very happy with the way that turned out. It could have gone south a couple times, but the good guidance that we got from our legal counsel at Eckert Siemens, the great guidance we got from the attorneys that were on the board. Even though some of them will say they're not real attorneys. I disagree. If you went to law school, you're a real attorney. And the guidance that we got from just, members in general as to what direction we want to proceed and how fierce do we want to be. I think the outcome was very good. We got an agreement and we got some immediate response. And now we have something that we can show to other counties if their practices fall outside of what's acceptable.
Yeah.
We have some other issues that we need to focus on, and hopefully this, that case presents, a challenge to, those counties where, rather than be sued, they would, listen to us and let us help. Because that's the one thing that I'm probably the most proud of with that whole thing is, the folks that work on recording practices and the liaison committee, you're reaching out to the counties and making an absolute good faith effort to not just point the finger and send angry letters, but to get in their offices and say, let us take a look at your processes if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Because we're process people.
Right.
And we understand that. Tell us if there's anything that our members are doing that makes your job harder, because maybe we can communicate that to them and grease the wheels for you. It's not just about, a legal response, even though that's where Hudson ultimately landed. There's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes to try to smooth over our relations with the county, because we need them as much as, well, they don't really need us, but we totally need them. So we understand, we've got to make sure that, not only are they doing their job, but, they don't see us as an enemy.
Right. Right. And the success, I think, is in the numbers, because I've been doing this for longer than I want to put a number on. But I have never seen the Hudson County board date in any of my time go below 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
And immediately following the settlement, it did.
Mm-hmm.
I think we got it down to 2 weeks, I want to say.
They were down to less than a week at one point.
Yeah.
But it didn't last very long.
No.
But we'll take what we can get. Small victories are victories.
Yeah.
And look, maybe there's still some opportunity for them to work over their processes and dial things in a little bit better.
Right.
But that's why we're here.
Yeah. And it allows the county liaison committee to be able to go into the counties that are problems beyond Hudson County and say, hey, listen,
Right.
we don't ever want to get to that point. We want to work together.
Right.
And I think that some responses that we've been getting, until they get tired of us again, and we may have to take drastic action again,
Right.
I think it's going well. I
Great.
think it's going well.
Excellent.
Okay. I mean, that's huge. How do we top that,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I think we can focus a little bit on a really big change, which
Mm-hmm.
was your last kind of order of business. I believe my first and your last kind of intertwined together.
Okay.
But we wanted to serve the association in the best interest of our members.
Mm-hmm.
And we felt it was time for a change in the administration of our association. Mm-hmm. We, worked with our management for decades.
Mm-hmm.
They were great. They did a lot of wonderful and amazing things for us. But it was time to maybe look to the future and get some refresh and some new ideas. And you did that.
Right.
Not only did you take the hard job of maybe,
Mm-hmm.
Talking about ending the relationship that existed,
Mm-hmm.
but you also found us the replacement.
Mm-hmm.
And I can say that I've been working with them and then they've been amazing. But why don't you speak about that a little bit and what
Sure.
that meant for you? And
Yeah, look, that was probably the most difficult thing, because everything else that we worked on that was a hard decision it really came down to pure business, right? It was all about business, and it's just things that had to be done. This was also business, but also very personal. You're talking about a couple of individuals on top of a firm that the NJLTA has had a 25-year relationship with.
in 2001, yeah.
Yeah. So it was no small idea to say, looking at what they provide versus what we need for the future is not a match.
Right.
And they are great people, and their contributions are well documented as being invaluable to our success, not only as an association, but as an industry.
Right.
So I think we tried to honor them the best that we could, and I hope they understand, in the long run that it was never about any lacking on their part. It was more about needing to have a solution that puts us in the best possible circumstances for strategy and planning and technology and everything that comes along with having professional association management. It's 2025 and we needed to be there. We need to be ready for 2045.
Yes, correct. One step ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we're doing. Ed was bestowed the Distinguished Service Award and also was made an honorary member. His involvement is welcome. I think he
100%.
made that perfectly clear. Louise, same thing, honorary member, and just will never be forgotten. I mean, led a lot of my way through. Everybody involved can say.
I remember when I was just a trustee on the agency section, and people would, say, "Oh, Louise is the one who makes sure everything works," and I had never met her, or if I did meet her, I didn't know who I was meeting.
Yeah,
I didn't realize it until I was like a little bit higher up the chain on the agency section board. Oh yeah, Louise was the one that knew where all the keys were, and it really kept us rolling.
The Wizard of Oz, if you will.
Absolutely. And I remember the scariest day of my career in all of my service for NJLTA was when I showed up at the Ocean in 2022, and Craig Nash met me with a giant box of stuff saying, "Louise has COVID. She's not coming to the convention."
See, and
I just went, "Oh no!"
Any other person would have turned around, walked back to the parking garage.
Well, past career as a catering manager, I just switched modes. I went from party host to catering manager, and just resigned myself to running around for the rest of the weekend.
I mean, I had ended up coming a little late. I had an engagement that weekend, but I showed up for the Monday events and got there about 2 minutes before the whole day kicked off, 7:30 in the morning. Wasn't in my seat for more than 45 seconds before Casey Wall was right at my ear. "Here's your bag, here's your tag, here's your this." I mean, how many hats can one man wear?
Yeah.
What's that Dr. Seuss book, Bartholomew and all the hats that just continue to grow,
So look, we don't want to make this discussion about how ADHD works. But multitasking is something that I do a lot.
A lot of overachievers in this industry, which is good.
True.
So how about Bennett Management? Let's talk about them a little bit. Where did you find them? Where did you guys look?
I don't know who to give the full credit to because their name came up a few times.
Okay.
We got a recommendation, I want to say, from somebody at the PLTA.
Okay.
We were initially speaking with their executive director, and she said, "You might want to look into the Bennett Group." She's like, "I'm too busy to help you guys out." No, it's not true. She was very helpful. But she did say, "It sounds like you need professional management." And Bennett Group was one of the ones that came up. And we did do cursory interviews with a couple of other association management companies. But none of them were a perfect match.
Right.
Most of them didn't. One of them didn't even know what title insurance was. And after we interviewed them, it was funny. We had a board meeting where we talked to them. He's like, "Oh, they were pretty good." And as soon as that meeting was over, I got an email and they were like, "We're opting out because we don't understand your industry." So they fired us before we had a chance to fire them.
Can't hold it against them.
Yeah, no, it's understandable.
Would have rather that than the other.
Right, absolutely.
Let's just give it a shot.
So Mark Bennett and his people, they run Ohio and New England and I think Kentucky.
And DC.
And Washington, DC.
Yeah.
So they're well versed in all things land title. Mark's also very involved at ALTA. And so, we don't have to worry about whether our executive director is going to be involved with what's going on at ALTA because he already is.
Yeah.
And, it's a very powerful thing to have 6 people on your account at any moment.
Yeah.
And it's a very valuable thing to have part of that be somebody who can plan your events, because speaking as somebody who's done it, and speaking from interviewing other people who would like to volunteer, but they just have no interest in being a party planner.
Right. Everybody had a wedding already for the most part, right?
So a lot of people that I've talked to about being prospective board members, their thing is, I don't want to plan the convention. Well, now that's not really a problem now, because Bennett Group will plan our conventions for them. We just tell them what we want it to look like.
Yeah.
And they have the staff to pull the strings and make things happen.
Yeah.
So I really think that, and a slew of other advantages, everything from AV, Zoom accounts, insurance, and just the knowledge of years of management of other land title associations and seeing things from a different perspective.
Yeah.
I think is really invaluable.
Yeah. The management side, hearing things about, tax filings and reporting and, how we can better the Institute. And, they've just come in with a lot of really great ideas. I myself have just started the process of planning a convention, which, I've been worried and brings anxiety. And I mean, they've been just making it so easy. They just want my ideas. They don't want any real footwork. And that's great. That's great to me.
Everybody I've spoken to from there has been great.
Yeah.
So Lori is a good manager, I guess. I don't know how else to put her. She's somebody who comes in and listens, and I think that's the first thing I notice is that they do a very good job of listening to what we're saying, not just responding to what we ask for.
Yeah.
So they really make an effort to understand what our wants and needs are, and not just respond to the things we ask for.
Right, and I think you're making this point, but also just bringing the ideas to the table that we never really had the capacity to think of ourselves in a different light.
They might hear we want this or that, and they might come to us as like, oh, I know you want this or that, but let's talk about how you get there first. Right. So without getting too into the weeds or the specifics about those kind of things, but it has been from my perspective so far a very good relationship. I hope it continues. Agreed.
So far, so good. So those are your two biggest. You ran it for a year seamlessly. There were really no bumps. Is there anything else that maybe you reflect upon that you were happy you took care of, or was it just a whirlwind? And
Yeah, look, it really does pass by you quick. Yeah. It's like anything else when your kids are little, and you're in it every day, and they've got doctor's appointments and school and homework, and you're like, oh my God, this is a lot of work. And then now my kids are grown up, and I think back and I'm like, God, that went by so fast. So I think it's kind of the same thing when you're in it and you're going through the chairs. You feel like, oh, it's going to be a long 14 years, or however long I've just signed up for. But then when it's over, it goes by very quickly, and your brain condenses it all into 10 seconds. Yeah. So I think more. I think about the successes, but I also think about the things where I wish I had more time and more capital to spend on things like making the committees more effective. Yes. And we have a couple of really effective committees: recording practices and the legislative committee, and even the temporary committees like the bylaw committee when they came up and redid the bylaws, which didn't get done under my year, but we put the football on the tee. Yeah. So it's for future generations to kick it through. But things like that, we can be highly effective, but there are a lot of committees that just kind of exist because they exist. Yeah. And one of them is, my committee, and I take full blame for not having done anything with it. But, I will also excuse myself to the effect that I think it should be focusing on different things. Right. And I've recently had a change in my work situation. So I haven't had much time to focus on that, but, I'm hoping at some point soon, the technology committee can be reformed. We can make it focus less on what the website should be about, which is really its only job right now. Yeah. To me, that's a marketing job, not a technology job, because the vendor will take care of the technology.
Right.
I think the technology committee should be looking into things like the impact of AI on our industry, or what tools does the average agent need to be successful, and can we maybe work with the NJLTA to maybe not do a credit class, or maybe we can work into credit, but maybe come up with like an agent's toolkit, things of technology that will benefit them. Because really the technology committee, just like the association itself, is different from what it was 20 years ago.
Right.
It's not the same. Like having a website isn't a technological feat anymore.
Right.
It's just a marketing tool.
Yeah.
The platforms are out there where, non-technologically savvy people can build a website, or you can hire somebody that does it, stem to stern.
Right.
You don't need to be knowledgeable about that. But what we do need to be knowledgeable about from a technology perspective is, how does wire fraud still happen? How do people still fall for suspicious emails? Who should we be contracting with as agents or even as underwriters to make sure that our people are trained to recognize phishing emails and social engineering attacks, as well as the understanding of what technologies are out there and emerging.
Right.
So I think I'd like to reform it in that way. I'm looking for volunteers to come along for that ride.
Any of you techies out there?
If you disagree and you still think that technology should just be about the website, let me know that too.
I do not disagree.
I acquiesce really easy.
Well, then I'll just, that's all great. There's no other person in our association. We're a lot of book people. We're wordy people. We don't have many of those tech savvy people. And I think you are the leader in that as well. I mean, you're a leader in a lot of things. I think you've led us. I mean, this right here. I mean, when have we ever videoed a podcast? I mean, come on.
Well, this is the lowest boundary of technology that you can breach.
I'm super impressed.
Right. I'm not Mr. Wizard. I'm comfortable with adding a little bit of technology to my life. I don't fear it. If something new comes out, I want to embrace it so that I at least have a baseline understanding of it.
Right.
But things like AI, I don't know if you use it in your day to day.
I do.
I use it increasingly.
Yeah.
And it's not a cheat so much as it is, I like to call it, an unpaid intern. I don't go to AI at this point for ideas. I go to AI to feed it my ideas and then have it spit it back at me in a new way so that I can look at it from another perspective without having to have a 1-hour meeting.
Yeah.
We did my first interaction with AI. I'll give you this little thing, was several years ago. We rewrote our company's vision, values, and mission.
Okay.
We were kind of reorganizing, and we wanted to set the standard. We had, I'm going to say, 3 2-hour meetings with a select group of managers where we came up with our values and our company's vision and mission, and we put it all on paper. And I thought to myself, geez, that was a lot of work for 5 or 6 people to do, taking us out of the office and all that stuff. I wonder if AI could have gotten us there quicker. And I just typed the general idea in a paragraph form into the current ChatGPT at that time, and it spit out all the values that we talked about, plus 2.
Wow.
It got like 80% of what we thought our vision was, and it nailed our mission.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, because if we had just had a meeting and took the meeting notes, like one meeting, 15-minute, 20-minute meeting, and while we're talking, somebody's typing the conversation into the AI, we would have been done.
Wow.
And it's not like it was, we asked the AI come up with our vision.
Wow.
I was putting prompts in there. We want a company that values its employees. We want a company that is good partners with its vendors and customers and things like that. I just put it in a paragraph form and said, create company values, vision, and missions from this information.
Wow.
And it's amazing. So it's, not to be discounted. And there's lots of platforms out there that are emerging that are focused on our industry and integrations with our softwares. And yeah, I think people should be looking at that.
Yeah.
Because I know I am.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I use it for a wide range of things. I used it for a job posting. I've used it for, I need to come up with a letter that talks about an estate issue. I've used it in this way. And as Casey said, I'm not just parroting. It's just giving you the groundwork, the footwork, and then you can take it and play with it. It also provides a little bit of amusement in my day. Before I left my house this morning, my husband showed me an AI video of kittens dressed as McDonald's employees that made baby sounds and showed their day at McDonald's from the beginning to getting their paycheck at the end. And that was great. I really enjoyed that.
Oh, man. You almost don't need drugs anymore.
I mean, yeah.
To see kittens working at McDonald's.
Kittens working at McDonald's.
Normally,
and you are enraptured by it.
Yeah.
Like, I want to see what a kitten working at McDonald's is.
So let's take that another step forward to make this an AI conversation. We really need to be cautious because I have friends and family members who will send me AI videos saying, "Can you believe this?" And I have to gently reply to them like, that's not real, right? That's, that person doesn't exist. What you're seeing didn't happen. That's just where we're at now. And, most of the time they're like, you got to be kidding me. I got. And I'm like, yeah, you got. But, sometimes there's disbelief. Like, you're telling me that's not real. It's like, I'm telling you that's not real.
Yeah.
And if you're not used to looking at these things, it can be tricky.
Yeah.
Because they're really realistic.
I mean, think about the federal employees that showed up to work to see their TV screens displaying the president kissing somebody's feet. Yeah, I mean, that was a shock. Is that real? What is that?
That's certainly something to talk about in the lunchroom. But,
honestly.
Yeah, I mean, there's videos like that on, any topic you can imagine out there on the internet. And it's very important for us to concentrate on how do we make sure we have a handle on what's true.
Yeah. I think control is an important part of it. I mean, if we've learned anything, even from fiction in the past, iRobot, I mean, we know the controls are important. But if used properly, I've really been impressed by what it can provide. And I'll just, one more story for a laugh. My 10-year-old came home from school very upset last night because her sister, 12-year-old, and a friend of theirs created an AI song by Taylor Swift singing about the breakup of her and Travis Kelce. And my 10-year-old was God. And I mean, it stuck with her for the rest of the night. How? It was so real.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, it's not just, cute pictures, it's videos and audio and, anything can be simulated.
Check out the latest cover article of The Advocate.
Right.
Really good insight on
I didn't know if you were going to mention it. But, this month's issue of The Advocate that just came out has a cover article with an AI twist without giving too much away. But there's an element discussed in that article that I think is worth talking about, and that's Google Notebook LM is an AI that has a finite resource of information. So when you're talking about ChatGPT and Copilot and large language models like that, they know what they know. They have trillions of pieces of information that they've been fed, and they get updated from time to time. But Google Notebook only knows what you give it. So you can feed it articles and say, summarize this for me. And then if you're not satisfied with the summary, you could say, turn this into a study guide. And, I've done that just for understanding of things that going on with business. I've got, a contract to read, and I've got, some other documents that go along with it. Feed them all into Google Notebook and say, summarize these documents for me. How do they relate to each other? So, is there anything in here that you think is important to note that somebody might miss? How might an attorney interpret these? It's not legal advice, but it helps you to visualize and understand these documents differently than having to sit down or first go to law school and then sit down and read them in full, which would take you hours.
Sure.
This cuts right to the chase. And, is it perfect? Probably not, but it's very, very good.
Yeah.
And for most circumstances, probably enough.
Yeah.
So, and it's definitely a powerful tool. I recommend investigating it, if not using it.
Wow. Yeah. Some really exciting stuff there. And for people that are interpreters, as in general in what we do, it's a little scary to hear that there's something electronic or robotic or artificial out there that can interpret things for you. But I think the point here that we can cap this with is don't be afraid.
Right.
Use it to your benefit and get ahead of it. And when you're using it to your benefit and getting ahead of it, it's never going to take you down because you're always one step ahead.
Right. Absolutely. Somebody who spoke at one of our association events said, AI won't take your job. The person who knows how to use AI might take your job.
Yeah.
So don't fear the robots. Fear the people that know how to make the robots work for them.
For them.
Because it's still, AI is nothing without human intention.
Yeah.
At this point, the machines don't care about selling houses or, making money. They just do what they're fed to do. The key there is to understand how best to put those things in place to make yourself successful.
Right. More sage advice. So we're going to take it back a little bit to the beginning again. And for future presidents, for future people in your position, what was and if you can't remember this, generalize it, please feel free. But, when you were walking in, I think you had a lot of hope. So can you talk a little bit about what that was generally, because we talked about the specifics, and then how it changed as you went through, even starting as Secretary Treasurer and making your way through?
Sure. I think, entering the board, coming from the agency section is a little bit like herding cats. We're a little bit of a disparate group, and it's understandable because, nobody in the agency section gets paid to attend, right? It's 100%.
Not that I'm aware of.
No, if there was any money being handed out, I didn't get any of it.
Yeah, man.
So it's a challenge to get, owner operators to come out. I think it's very important and something that whenever I meet an owner of an agency, I grab him by the shoulder and I say, "Hey, bud, we need to see you.
Yeah.
It's good that you send your people, but we also need you there because this is about your business." So, coming from that to the board, it's there's a little bit more gravity to it, but I quickly learned that, I don't want to, toot my own horn, but I've been working.
That's what this is about.
I've been working in some supervisory capacity since I was, 16 years old. Whether it was at the, Boy Scout camp where I worked, or the fast food restaurant where I worked, or the hotel where I worked, or every job I've had, I've found myself in some sort of supervisory or management capacity. And I learned a lot along the way from a lot of good people and a lot of people whose example I would never want to replicate.
Right.
So when I, was elevated to the board and elected, and I saw some things that were like signs of the past, the people who came before us setting things up for success. But I also noticed that it seemed like at some point the oral tradition broke down a little bit.
Sure.
And there was no football. There was no manual other than the bylaws, which are great, but they're bylaws. They're not,
And Louise.
And Louise.
So
Louise was the glue, right?
Yeah,
she
right.
remembered the way things were.
Right.
And that's how, we realized that, okay, from Louise telling us this is the way things work, that, somebody at some point, or some bodies at some point, put a lot of thought and effort and time into making the association a viable, productive entity.
Sure.
But, I focused on trying to contribute in ways that would be long lasting and contiguous.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like to make sure that the next person knows, like, hey, you got to pick this up. I still think we have probably a little bit more to do on that.
Sure.
Making things, replicable, without the next crew having to come in and reinvent anything.
Right.
They could spend their time on strategizing for changes without having to make sure that they're crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's of the administrative part of it. And the Bennett Group goes a long way towards that as well.
Yeah.
I think having them in place, they're already, archiving our minutes and things like that.
Yeah.
So, I foresee that we'll probably get down the road with them a piece, and they'll be helping us to, come up with just operations manuals or things like that are adjuncts to the bylaws that are fed from the bylaws, but are in plain language. So, okay, when I have to do a meeting, this is what I do.
Right.
When I'm taking minutes, or this is what I need to report. It's just the small things like that.
Right. And, we have a good core 4 now, but that term is coming to an end soon.
Mm-hmm.
Casey is on the board or on the committee.
Nominating committee.
The nominating committee. So please,
past president is the chair of the nominating committee, I believe.
Joy.
So yeah, I've got some ideas
Yeah.
about who I'd like to, because I think the next one is they do the back and forth underwriter agent.
Yeah.
Next one's an underwriter. I have some ideas about who I'd like to ask.
Yeah.
And I've already spoken to them briefly, immediately after my term was over, just to kind of plant the seeds. And then I haven't been bothering them since.
Let them, sit
just
on it.
let it ferment a little bit, and then I'll check in with them, before it gets too close to go time, and say, hey, are you still in, or do I need to go hunting? I think if the candidate I'm hoping for says yes, we'll be well suited for the next 5 years.
Very nice. And any of you underwriter members out there that may want to throw your hat in the ring.
That's right. If you're interested, please.
I don't know that that's ever happened.
I don't think
that's ever happened.
Everybody's always been voluntold. But if you are interested, do reach out, because it's helpful to bring people aboard who already have the interest
and the want to take it on. It's thankless. While doing it, but the goals are where you receive the appreciation.
My father went to Catholic high school and was taught by Jesuits, and I always learned from him that the doing is its own reward.
Yes.
And the other story I like to tell about doing things for the act of doing it versus the reward is Wynton Marsalis tells a story about Wynton Marsalis is a trumpet player. Just in case I'm speaking music nerd here.
I actually knew who he was. I'm just going to...
I don't want to discount your music knowledge, but he tells a story about how he did a solo when he was young, where he used a technique called circular breathing. And that's where you breathe, you store air in your cheeks, and you use that air to continue playing the instrument while you inhale through your nose.
Oh, geez.
And that way you never stop to take a breath.
I'm picturing Dizzy with the big old cheeks.
Yeah, well, that was a different story. He just had a weird, technique of blowing his cheeks out. Yeah. But this is like, you can see circular breathers because their cheeks do puff momentarily, but then they have to squeeze them out to use that air.
Wow.
To not stop playing.
A lot of thought process behind the breathing method.
Yeah. So he uses this circular breathing technique, and he's on stage performing, and he does this jazz solo that goes on for a long time, and it's very technical, and people recognize, oh, he's not taking a breath. He's, just all on one breath. And the crowd goes nuts. They love it. When he comes off stage, he says his father, who's also a jazz musician, kind of shook his head and called him over and said, I just want to tell you something. If all you ever play for is the applause, that's all you'll ever get.
Wise words.
So I feel about it the same way. If you're just doing it for the plaques and the applause, that's all it'll be for you when it's over. But if you really dig into it and try to make it something that makes a difference, or even if you just give it your all, that's enough. But if you're just doing it to pass through the chairs and have something to hang up, it won't be enough for you at the end.
And I feel like a lot of people that are in it for that purpose fall off before.
Right.
They just don't have it in them to take the, what is it? At this point, if you are an agent like we are, and you want to get up to a place where you're considered for the executive board, you're 14 years?
Yeah.
14 years, 2 years over a 7-year period, 7 trustees. I mean, that's a lot of dedication.
A long commitment to get through all the chairs in the agency section, and then to go through the board.
Yeah.
I had a couple of accelerated years because we had a couple of people drop out. and I'm not, when I made that story about the intent of why you did it, I'm not talking about anybody specifically
No,
because I
people
couldn't even
definitely have
actually think of
reasons.
anybody that
Yeah.
I know. But I'm just saying, like, when you get involved with this, if you're thinking about it, get involved with it with the intent of making a difference.
Yes.
And then even if you don't, the experience will be gratifying.
And then all of the thank yous and the plaques and the rewards and the titles and the history mean something.
They'll be tied to meaning.
Yeah.
And not just something that you did.
I personally don't even think about it as I move through because I want to get through and look back and just be like, wow,
Right.
So.
Yeah, I want to look back and I want to be around.
Yeah.
That's my thing. It's like I think about the guys who came before us who were always around. Key among them, I would just call out Joe Grabus, who was a partner with me on the podcast when we interviewed Larry Feinberg.
Yeah.
Talking about Larry. Larry retired and he was around for a long time, just hanging out and answering title questions. He's still around.
Still shows up to the agency meetings for that education.
Yeah, he comes out to the agency section meetings and he joins panels. Whenever we have education to do. So, I want to be that kind of person who, I do my service, but my service never ends.
Right. That's a good way to look at it. I don't know how much you want to touch on this, but I thought maybe it'd be good to talk about some of the people you worked with while you were president, some of the committees you worked with. Again, you touched on this a little bit, but some of the people that stood out, some of the people that you think really helped make the association run.
So, all right, the danger about this is that I'm not going to remember everybody.
Anybody involved
Yeah.
helps the association.
First of all,
clear.
Anybody I've ever interacted with, thank you. And I appreciate you. And if I don't mention you, it's not for lack of appreciation. It's just because I'm 51 and my memory is not as sharp as it was once.
And let's not sell it short. You also just came off a presidency, have a great new job situation, and
I got a lot going on.
It's not slowing down.
That being said, if I'm going to name names, so first I'm going to say the board that worked with me when I was president, I appreciate them so much because from day one, we had pre-BOG meetings. I don't know if you guys are keeping that tradition.
Oh, yes.
But I don't know if it was ever a thing before and I brought it back or if it was a novel idea, but I said, a week or two before every board of governors, we're going to have an executive board meeting so that we have one message and we're all on the same page and rowing in the same way.
Right.
And it was very beneficial for all of us to be able to understand what's important to us as a board, making it less of a, president in charge and everybody else just waiting to be president versus a management team who's focused on getting results.
Very important thing he left behind because that's very much being continued and it's just
I'm happy about that. The board that served with me, John and Lisa and John, always grateful. Everybody that I worked with on the agency section management board, you and Cindy and, everybody else that, was in and out and stayed with us the whole way. And, Lisa Dombrowski was a great vice president. She's going to be a great vice chair. She's going to be a great president, I'm sure. Just the fact that she successfully planned and executed 2 great conventions, hers and Jason. Sorry, Jason, I'm calling you out. But you know it.
We all know
you know
truth.
It. Lisa planned that other convention. But the fact that she had to do it twice when most people barely survived doing it once, and both of her conventions were fantastic.
Amazing.
Is great. And not only that, but she's a tremendous person and a good business person as well.
Yeah, great business mind.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm thankful for all of them. Of course, thankful for Ed and Louise to have been the glue and leadership for all those years. When I think about some other people that I would call out specifically, Maureen Crowley, who forestalled her retirement just to make sure I got through my convention.
Oh.
And I thought that was very I appreciated that a lot. And people like Nancy Cook and Larry Feinberg, of course, and George Stickle, and I already mentioned Joe Grabus, but Joe and I have done a lot together for the association, and he's done a lot on his own for the association. And I would say he would probably agree with this, but we'll find out, I guess, once this airs. If he doesn't, I'm sure I'm going to find out. But I think he would agree that he's never afraid to speak his mind. And I think for some people that, may rub them the wrong way, especially if he's on the other side of their argument.
Yeah.
But I appreciate people who aren't afraid to tell me they disagree with me.
Yeah.
Please
do.
I find that so valuable, because to fall into the misconception that your ideas are more valuable or better than anybody else's just because you've really worked on them and you think you've done a good job is a giant trap that a lot of people fall into.
Yeah.
And to the extent that it's constructive and professional and done from a place of caring, I 100% appreciate people coming up and telling me that they think I'm wrong or that there's a better way, because that discussion can only lead to the betterment of the association.
100%.
So, and Joe, if you're listening, just tell me if I'm wrong.
He will. So many great people to look up to.
Yeah, and then I've also been a trustee on the NJLTA, and everybody that's been involved with that from when my contributions were minimal and just administrative, just helping out with setting up slides and things like that, to actually teaching classes and working with you on stuff. Has been wonderful, and the NJLTI has great new leadership. Jane is going to be a good, hopefully, chair for as long as she wants.
Yeah.
We already told her she's not allowed to leave, but we'll see if she listens. But and shout out to Andrew Pittman for basically resurrecting the NJLTI.
Yeah.
It was not doing well, and he brought it back to life.
Yeah.
So that's a great achievement. I'm running out of brain power.
That's all right. You got a lot of names in there.
Suffice to say that if I didn't mention you, you can come up and punch me in the shoulder. And I'll shake your hand and in person tell you how much I appreciate you.
I didn't know he was a heartbreaker too, guys.
Yeah, it's not it's not an accident that all these great things happen. A lot of people have to come together and work hard and make this thing work. And my appreciation for that is huge.
Yeah. One of the first things that the Bennett Group assessed was how many great people give their time and are involved and care and do so much for this association. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So just a few more things, if you'll have it. You talked about your hope walking in and how it changed over the course of your tenure.
Mm-hmm.
How about for the future? And you touched on this a little bit, but maybe just a final thought on your hopes for where we go from here.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I hope is that this industry continues to serve the public the way that it does.
Yeah.
I think there's been a lot of change recently, and I don't think that change is over. And I think there's, we're living at a point where, we've got this Schrodinger's cat thing going on, where there's a lot of, or there might be a lot of Schrodinger's cats. We might have like a whole cattery of potential, outcomes that between artificial intelligence and governmental involvement with our business that we didn't really have to worry about before, and then new regulations that put new burdens on us, and the changing in the housing market, and the change in the economy in general, and the change in the global economy, and it's a lot of variables to try to feed into the computer to say where are we headed.
Right.
But I think if you consider that people are always going to need a place to live, right? So
Sure.
Residential housing is not going anywhere.
Nope.
And real estate in general is still a pretty stable investment.
Yeah.
I'm optimistic. I don't think our careers are going anywhere. I do think that the process of title examining and commitment and policy production will be greatly changed in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
I think it'll start in the West, and it'll try to come east gradually, and then it'll hit the 13 colonies, and it'll slow down, but I don't know if you completely stop it.
Yeah.
Especially with the way things are headed with AI. I think eventually they'll crack that code. It's always been, so everybody's always said, it's too hard here. It's just, you can't just push a button and get title.
A lot of history,
yeah, but computing power and memory is to the point. Especially when we're talking about like things like quantum computing are going to be a reality. It's already a reality. It's just not an affordable reality. But what memory used to be expensive, and now you can get a terabyte of memory for under $100.
Right.
So a terabyte of memory, 10 years ago would have been exorbitantly expensive, but now it's relatively cheap.
Right.
So if processing and computing goes the way of memory, which we feel that it might, especially with quantum computing, things could change rapidly. They'd be able to. The problem has always been, how do you digest that much data? Well, that's around the corner. So I think it'll be different. I think I don't think it goes away because, again, human intention is needed in order for these things to mean anything.
Yeah.
So you're still going to need people. But look, maybe the upside of that is one thing where our industry's done a bad job is with recruiting and raising up young talent. It's hard to find young people that want to do this. I'm almost of the mindset where maybe we should give it some time to ferment and see what happens with the business and the market before we go ahead and give all these people careers that might evaporate.
You're right.
Right. So it might be a tighter set of individuals. We're still going to need young people, but maybe we need to be more selective about the young people that we bring as technology advances.
And the skills we're teaching them. Yeah.
Right. What skills are going to be important? I'll give a company secret away. So this is
take my pen out.
Dave and Dan and Scott. Don't get mad at me. I think this is important to share with everybody. But at our company, we're committed to hiring for character first. We want people to work with us that we know are good people and who are, I don't want to say necessarily driven, but maybe slightly entrepreneurial.
Okay.
If you're just coming to work to sit in a seat and punch a clock and go home, I'm probably not looking to hire you.
Right.
But if you're going to come in and ask me questions all day, first of all, I love it. A lot of bosses would be like, God, you should just leave me alone. Let me be in my office, answer my phone calls and my emails and drink my coffee.
Yeah.
But when I have an employee or employees that are coming into my office all day asking me things out of a genuine want to know more about this business or to do their job better, I'm exhilarated. I'm so
Sit down, please.
Right. Yeah. Let's just to find another person who cares about this even just a little bit as much as I do.
Yeah.
Makes me so happy. And that's the kind of people I think we should be targeting.
That's cool.
Like I don't see any reason to go to temp agencies. Not that there's anything wrong with temp agency if you have a need, but if you can find young people who have good character and bring them in and show them a path, try to lead them and inspire them that they can make something of themselves in this business.
Yeah.
I think, when technology and the markets finally show us where this business is headed, we'll be best suited to adapt.
Yeah.
With those people in play.
Yeah. And I also think we need a bit of time for the generation under us to get out of the pandemic mindset and back into work and what that means and ethic and, it's hard
I think
to find.
we're pretty close.
We're getting there.
I think we're pretty close. And, a lot of people are, that I've interacted with work-wise are very much, appreciative of being in the office and, being able to interact with others And that also goes to the character thing. You know, if you're hiring people that are really good at their jobs, but who contribute to a toxic work environment,
right?
Why wouldn't you want to work at home?
Right.
Right. Why would you want to work there?
Why?
But when you're hiring people who, you know, understand the value of getting along and understand the value of respect and sharing and, you know, all those things that make for a great work environment. Yeah. You want to go to work. Yeah. I know I want to go to work every day. I've got more of a commute than I've had in a long time, but I still get excited. I want to get up and I want to get there because I enjoy working with who I work with, and I enjoy teaching, and I enjoy, you know, watching people like pick up new skills that they might not have had before. So it's rewarding and challenging at the same time. Yeah. And I think that's, you know, in this industry, I would hope that that's the workplace of the future for everybody. Yeah. Hire good people, because the challenges in front of us are going to require that entrepreneurial mindset of, that might not be my job, but I'm going to try. I'm going to try. And you need leaders at your company that will say, I trust you, you're going to do the right thing. Yeah. And if you come up against it, so important, and you give it your best, and you fail, I'm not going to crush you for it. We're going to talk about it, and we're going to learn from it, and then everybody's going to learn from it, and then we'll be better. Right. You know, so I really think that's the best plan for the future at any title company is get good people and, you know, try to limit people with bad habits and just get ready for change, because I think that's going to be the theme for the next 10 years. I'm going to talk to you in a year, and I want to know how successful you were at finding those people. All right. I'll let you know. They're out there. It's just, where do we find them these days, right? Well, you know, look, a lot of people that I would say I've either hired or worked with or whatever that are of that good character. People come from other industries. Yeah. You don't need to hire somebody who's got, you know, 20 years of title experience. Yeah. You know, unless you're looking for an examiner, well, that's, you know, the kind of, you got to find a nerd to fill the nerd chair. But, you know, for almost everything else in the office, some of the most successful people that I've worked with come from backgrounds in service industries and retail. I would say that it's exceptionally valuable to get people from certain service industries where customer service training is paramount. Yeah. So an example that, you know, people are probably tired of hearing me say this, but I come from a background in hotels. And if you've ever been to a nice hotel, it's not an accident that everybody from the front desk to housekeeping is pleasant and smiling and saying, hello, good morning, how are you? Because they train on that basic of a level. Not that people don't understand saying hello is good, but there's a difference between understanding that saying hello and making eye contact is a good thing, and your boss saying, anytime you approach a guest, you make eye contact and you say good morning. And then you understand that, okay, that's how I behave. And then they model that behavior. Right. That's what's also important is, you know, modeling behavior for your people. It's not just enough to hire good people. Yeah. You need to make sure that you're living it every day. Right. And I think you and I have similar backgrounds in that, you know, the whole mantra in this industry is you fall into it in two ways. You either just fall into it and had no idea it existed, or you have a family history in it. Right. You and I think, are both of the breed that just fell into it and fell in love with it. Yeah. You touched on a point about wanting to go to work every day. And I worked a lot of jobs that I hated, a lot of retail, a lot of temping I did for a little bit. And I did not want to get up and go to work. And the second I took title as soon as I took my first title job, that whole mindset changed. And I was young. I was still in my teens. Wow. So I wish to have that mindset where, you know, I'm not playing hooky and I'm not, you know, I want to go to work. You know, I'm in my 20s and I'm spending out all night in the city, not sleeping, and coming to work the next day because I want to go to work. You know, this industry provides that. I think I was 29 when I got into title. Yeah. And I'd worked in a lot of industries before that. And if I could go back in time and like do like the Biff Tannen, Back to the Future thing where I find my younger self, and I wouldn't give myself an almanac, but I would say, drop what you're doing and just go to community college and get your associate's degree. Decide whether or not you want to get a bachelor's degree, but don't fixate on it.
Yeah.
And by the way, you're going to start a job in title insurance at the same time.
Yeah.
You're going to start, from the bottom up. You're going to learn everything about it, and trust me, you'll love it.
You'll love every aspect.
So if I had known earlier on, I can only imagine, what it must be like to just have this be the entirety of your working life. But maybe I wouldn't have been as good. Now, if you really think about it, now we're bringing time travel movies into this interview. We're all over the place.
I've been writing the script, so stay tuned.
Maybe I wouldn't have been as good at my job if I didn't have those lousy jobs. And some of them weren't lousy jobs. They're just jobs that you tend to burn out on.
Yeah, jobs that don't give you the joy, that don't, feed your mind. That's important. That's important. Yeah. Service industry, whoa, that'll kill you fast.
Right. Customers who, get a bad steak are almost as bad as sellers' attorneys who don't like you.
I feel like the service we provide, and we are in the customer service industry, but I feel like it comes with substance, and I think that's what separates it from me.
100%.
I don't want to hear about your steak.
Right.
I've got to go get this table its drinks. You know what I mean?
I also feel like I've won over more sellers' attorneys who didn't like me or my company than I have people who didn't like their meal at a restaurant, or were upset with the room they got, or the fact that we didn't have any rooms left when they showed up, and things like that. I don't think it's easy to win those people over, because it's such a transient kind of thing. It's super transactional. Like they'll never be back at your hotel. They don't have to go to your restaurant. There's 100 restaurants in a mile radius.
Yeah.
But for title insurance, the people that we work with, we're just going to see each other over and over again. So if you've got any ability at all to smooth people over and be like, hey, you don't have to, use us or love us, but, we love you and we want to make sure everything goes well. And we have your interests, just as much as the other side's interests. We're kind of neutral here. And, I think we can work people over and win people over a lot easier in this business than in the service industries. And that's rewarding. And then on top of that, we get to solve puzzles, and we get to, read
history
about things.
And
just yesterday I was examining a file, and, a bail thing came up in the county, and I was like, I have to Google this name and find out what this person did. Cause I'm looking at this, conspiracy, misuse of government office. And you start gasping at all the things in the bill, and then you look up the article and you're like, oh, that's a bad guy. He did a bad thing. And, so you get to see gossipy stuff, and, that's all fun. And then, and we also know stuff that the average person doesn't know. Yeah. And when it comes up in conversation, people, cock their head and look at you like, how do you know that? It's like, well, because I deal with dead people a lot. So I know how estates work.
Yeah, my family loves to take advantage of that knowledge base, let me tell you. So another thing that you and I share is, and you touched on owners and why they should get involved, but another thing that we share is that we got involved when we weren't owners. Right. We were management. And, we don't turn people away because you're not an owner. I mean, Casey's situation has changed, but he did most of his footwork when he was not the owner of a
almost all of it.
Yeah, of an agency. He just cared about the industry and making, even selfishly, in a way, you can do it to make your job easier because it is the industry working. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, look, I will say this. So, very early on, from my first title job, as soon as I realized that I had to do so many credits of continuing education a year, being the cheapskate that I am, I needed to find a way to make that not cost me any money.
Right.
And so I found out about the NJLTA agency section giving free CE classes. And I was like, wow, I'm going to go to every single one.
Yeah.
And it started out as, just going to every NJLTA agency section meeting and sitting in the front row and, paying attention and really like, at first I was new to the industry and I was really learning versus being refreshed. I was learning stuff that I didn't know before. So I would come back to the office with like a manual and be like, yo, I just heard Larry Bell talk about this great thing. And,
on my shelf right now, I have the old Stewart binded. With my notes on the side,
I had so many of those. And I gave them to somebody that followed me. I passed them along.
Sure.
They became more valuable to people who need that information. But I remember that at first I was like, this is a treasure trove of knowledge. I'll never miss one of these.
Yeah.
And as my career developed, it became like, all right, this is an easy way to stay in touch with the topics, especially if they're talking about new stuff, and to keep myself current on the difficult stuff.
Right.
And then one day I was just sitting in the front row and Al Santoro stepped down off the dais at the intermission and said, do you want to sit up there? And me being like, I don't always pick up on what people mean when they say stuff like that. I was like, now? And he goes, no, not now. I mean,
calm down.
Would you like to be a trustee? I said, oh. I was like, well, I'd consider that. Let me talk to my boss and I'll get back to you. Because, at that point I was just going to these things. But I was involved while I was there, sitting up front, asking questions and, making sure that I was getting the most out of it. And so now I'm going to talk about, the guy that I first worked with at the last company I worked, which was Ed Rickenbach. And, a lot of people know him and most people love him. Maybe some people don't, but that doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
I will say that one of the things I appreciated about him the most was that when I came to him and I said, look, I've been invited to be a trustee on the agency section board. It'll probably take some of my time away from work, but I promise I won't let it impact, what we're doing here. His reaction was, I think that's great. I think you should go for it. And I know you'll be awesome. So he was completely supportive of it, from the get-go. And I hope we have a lot of people out there like that doing that for their people. Especially if you've got title nerds sitting in your office, looking for a way to get involved.
Yeah.
Get them out, tell them to go to those, CE classes, have them go to the meetings, have them participate on your behalf, ask questions and bring information back to the office. Go with them if you can.
Yeah.
Especially if you're the owner, sit next to them and then discuss it.
Yeah.
Let your opinion and your voice be heard. And then if you've got that, that special individual working in your office who's willing to give of their time because they think it's worthwhile, encourage them.
Yeah.
And give them that blessing of this opportunity.
Yeah. Don't say not me. You don't want me. We do want you. You should and you can.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. So I'm gonna two more questions.
Sure.
This is a little bit of selfish question.
Okay.
So sorry guys. Words of wisdom.
Oh.
Words of wisdom for the current and any future management board. What's your biggest piece of advice for us?
So I would say if I could only give one piece of advice to everybody else who's coming to be president and our current president, it would be believe in your vision. But that begs the question, do you have a vision? Right? So believe in yourself, but make sure the thing that you believe in is something that you've thought about.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's one of the things we tried to do during my presidency is to be very forthright about this is what we believe and this is the path we're gonna tread, and we're looking for everybody's support, but we're really gonna push hard for it because we did the work.
Right.
We sat down and we talked about it and we asked for help and we went out and we checked all the boxes and didn't fly by the seat of our pants. So yeah, believe in yourself and make it happen because otherwise it won't. But do the work.
Yeah.
Do the work to be prepared so that, when it's time to get people behind you, you're not floundering for an excuse for them to support you. You've already got the work done.
It's great advice. It's great advice. And one thing that I'll just tag on to that as somebody who's watched Casey at work, don't be afraid. Don't be
Yeah.
afraid. Don't, everybody in this association, everybody in this industry that's involved wants to hear new and fresh ideas, wants to hear how you feel things could change for the better. So don't be afraid.
Yeah, look, at every stage of this, you're going to have an opportunity to erode a little bit of your stage fright.
Yeah.
So if you get involved as an agent on the agency section board, speak up early and speak up about your bad ideas and your good ideas. Don't judge your ideas until you've said them out loud. And don't knock yourself in the head for having something that people disagree with.
Yeah.
Because it's better that you said it and somebody else corrected it than nobody ever said it and it's still hanging out there as a possibility. Right. So yeah, come and contribute and be prepared to be wrong and embrace your wrongness and be prepared to be right.
Yeah.
And when somebody tells you you have a good idea, believe in yourself. Believe in yourself before you're right, and then when it's confirmed, store that. And remember, for the next time when I have another idea, I'm going to contribute and I'm going to say something, and I'm going to hopefully either see my contribution turn into something, or maybe it'll spark somebody else's ideas.
Yeah. Take a page, people. Take a page. All right, one final question.
Okay. I'm ready.
Would you be interested in doing it again?
So, yeah, look, this came up. I was talking to somebody else about it, and I said, I'm not looking to get back in, right? I'm not looking for an excuse to do the whole thing over again. But if something happened and we had a dearth of volunteerism or there was some need, I would not hesitate to volunteer and start all over again.
My God. I mean, if that doesn't speak to the person that this man is, I can't say what does.
I said early on, I have a disease. I can't physically say no when people are asking me for help. So yeah, would I do it again?
Say no.
When they ask me for help. I don't lend money and I don't fix tires and I don't do electric work. I will help you with your plumbing though. I've done some plumbing in the past, although it's been a while. I don't know how good I am anymore. But yeah, I would do it again. It was more rewarding than it was difficult. So absolutely.
And that's when you know that it's important and it means something when you enjoy doing it, whether it's your career, whether it's your involvement in the association.
True.
Well, these are some pretty big shoes to fill. I am very lucky to be the one that was able to conduct this interview. You have left quite a path to follow, and again, this is not goodbye for Casey. He's going to be around, whether he likes it or not.
Right.
And on to the future. And just thank you for the monumental changes and the impacts and everything you did with just one short year of time.
Well, look, it's absolutely my pleasure to have had the opportunity to serve as president and all the other chairs that I went through. I would say this interview, I could think a few other people that I'd rather be interviewed by. I think you know how much I esteem you and all of the great things that you've done for the association and the industry, between the Institute and the Advocate, which, the award-winning Advocate, the perennial award-winning Advocate. It's just a monument to your professionalism and your talent and your skill. And on top of that, you're a great person. So, if you don't know Heather yet, get to know her because she's one of those people in your life that, you'll be thankful to have had the opportunity to meet. And look for this podcast to be advertised in the Advocate. Yes. As well as future episodes. If you're a past president and I haven't interviewed you yet, reach out because I want to get you in the chair.
We want to hear everything you have to say too.
And in 4 years from now, we'll have the opportunity to interview Heather. And so,
should it all go as planned?
Yeah. So look, you're our guest host. Do you want to close it out or do you want me to close it out?
I'm going to let you close it out because really I'm just doing a job here. This is Casey's.
So, kudos and applause and and appreciation to our guest host, Heather Bell, today, who did a fantastic job. That was a great interview. The subject, he was a little dry, but you made it work. And tune in next time where we interview more past presidents of the NJLTA and ask them about what it was like and what they've been up to.
Happy title.
Happy title. Take care, everybody. And now the awkward turning off of the camera.